Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Take TV podcast post round 23. Today we have a very special guest we'll get to shortly, but on the agenda today, we'll go over our ranks and our best players for the season. We'll interview Selby from Moreira's Magic, who finished 8th this year, so outstanding job, and also reflect on our 2022 seasons. And also towards the end of the video, we'll discuss the All-Australian squad, which just dropped, so that should be fun. Boys, how are we?
Good, Jordan.
Excellent. So we'll cross over to everyone one by one. So I think we'll start with our guests, Selby. So what was your rank this year, and who are your best three players for the year? And the Don't Come Monday award.
Hold on. You got to give Selby a proper intro here. All right. So for those that don't know, because we're a Supercoach podcast, they may not know a ton about Selby or Moreira's Magic, as he's more commonly known in the fantasy world. So back-to-back first finishes. I think you've also had two other finishes in the top 100 as well. So you've four really, really good results, and then decided it was too easy, so stopped. I started running a fantasy advice website for the last couple of years, which has been super successful. Started the AFLW fantasy competition, and then decided, you know what, let's just have a double at the Supercoach game, see what that's all about, and got a top 10 finish straight off the bat. So the absolute legend GOAT himself when it comes to fantasy footy formats in Australia, and it's very, very, very special to have him talking to us because he's got a lot of other things to do with his time. You know, his own podcast with Dave Ellis. He's top 10 Tommy on Supercoach side as well. So very appreciative of the little time he has. So thank you for being here, Selby. But yes, please go over how you finished your last round and all the good stuff.
Gee, that's a pump up, JD. Thanks for that, George.
No pressure.
Yes, I finished 8th in the end, which was, I think I was 9th leading in. So I wasn't too nervous all season, but the old fancy nerves, it brought back some memories that last round. And then Sammy Walsh, I got a bit of luck. Sammy Walsh being the laid out, all but sealed the top 10. So 8th, happy with that. In terms of for the season, best three picks. Oh, it'd be the underpriced guys in defence, I think. Sicily, Hewitt, and third, probably Will Brodie, who I didn't actually start with, mind you. But the popular, we'll go through philosophies in my team. There was no one really in my team who was unique. They were just, I seemed to nail most of the good ones. So those three were the keys, and also a soft spot for Paddy Cripps, who also brought it home strong, which again, speaking of luck, 2 weeks before when it looked like he was out for the last 2 weeks, that top 10 vote was looking all dead and buried. So he certainly had a bit of luck to finish it.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of shocked that you finished in the top 10 because I think we were talking a month out and you were probably out of trades at that point. And I think you usually ask from a Hewitt or something like that. I thought there's no way you're going to get unscathed. And not only did you manage to dodge all the bullets, you went up in ranks over that period as well. So pretty amazing effort.
Yeah, no, it was crazy towards the end. I was hard on my trades. Again, we'll probably go through it soon, philosophies and what I've learned from fantasy-wise. But was holding on to one or two for pretty much the whole back half of the year. Used the last on Hewitt for Stewart, which didn't really yield that many points in the end. Stewart was pretty underwhelming the last couple. But, yeah, carnage happened around me. So all of a sudden, everyone else was forced to have 1 or 0 trades as well. So it was pretty quick. I think from 1 week, it looked like I was the only one with 1 to then 3 weeks' time, everyone had 1 or 0. So I was back at level playing field. And, yeah, the Cripps decision / Walsh out late propelled me up towards the end.
Yep. So I think next we'll go to JD since he thinks he's hosting. So JD, what was your rank and who's your top 3 and your Don't Come Monday award?
Hey,
the floor is yours again.
Don't Come Monday's going to you at this rate, George. So 3, 2, 1. I think my MVP for the year was probably Jared Witts, who I kind of started as a bit of an accident in the end with Darcy being a laid out, but was low owned and kind of held my team together given how bad the rest of the starting team was. 2, I'd give to Dawson. Just really enjoyed owning him, and he was one of the more unique premiums I picked at the start of the year that went well for the whole thing. And then the 1 point, I really didn't have too many good picks that lasted the rest of the year. So it could go to either Cogs or Neil, who are both underpriced, but they were very highly owned. So Don't Come Monday. I think Crisp, I hate him. I never want to watch him play football again. I don't want to see his TikToks. I don't want to hear about him. So he'll be irrelevant next year as he'll go mid only. And look, a little bit harsh because it does sound like he's been carrying injury the back half of the year, but he's been a misery to own from about the buys on. So that'll be who I give it to.
Yeah, so I missed my Don't Come Monday, and I'll double down, Chris. You mentioned from the buys. I've got him in during the buys and purely for buy planning. The choice between him and Sinclair, but I was pretty heavily had enough players in that last buy round where Sinclair was playing and Crisp wasn't playing. So the decision to get Crisp over Sinclair to get one extra player throughout the buys. I did run the maths recently, but I think the difference is about per week for 12 weeks, and I'm not sure how much I lost by, but I think it was a difference between winning, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Don't do that to yourself. I did that with FPL last year. I don't want to know about it because I think, similar thing. I guess it's me up. So finished 2,609th in the end. Top 3 players. I think the top one probably has to be Merritt for me, just because of what he did for my rank, in the back half of the year. Sort of propelled me up the ranks. 2, I'll go a little bit left field in a bit, but Nick Dacos, the fact he's still on my team in round 23 and, went, 105 the last couple of months, was amazing. And then I'll give the 1 to Dawson as well. Started him as well. Wasn't good in the last week and, cost himself the top defender of the year, but still, I think, top 3, top 4, and was really consistent for the most part. And the Don't Come Monday has to just go to old Baslenka. The fact that me and JD brought him in, knowing that he'd probably highly likely get the forward DPP, he did, and then he went and got himself suspended and then, double suspended, I guess. But then the fact that he was like the best option I could afford when Cogs was out and I had no cover, got him back in, and he's been abysmal for the last 2 or 3 weeks again. So, yep, he's been really poor. But yeah, what about you, Jordan? What would your players be?
Yep. So my rank was 2,093. Sammy Walsh late out kind of stung a little bit, but nonetheless, a lot of other things that could have helped my rank there. 3 votes. I did trade him out, but I have to give it to Heaney just for his start, all the points he got. A lot of non-believers here, but he played very well. It's an interesting one, Heaney, because he's one of the very few players that can score without CBAs, but he needed a massive preseason. 2 votes. I think I got in Laird about round 7 or 8, and he's been just immense for captaincy consistency. So yeah, trying to avoid tagged plays for captains and whatnot, underperformers. Took out a few down ones. I lost a few points on him as a captain, but yeah, Laird's captaincy scores were much appreciated. And the 1 vote got to give to, I think, James Sicily. So I jumped on him pretty early. I think round 4, and just been. It's interesting with Sicily because he did 110 in the COVID year before he got switched forward and did the ACL. And he said in the preseason this was his best preseason ever. He worked harder than before, and he's done more than 110 off his best preseason ever. So maybe should have started him. And Don't Come Monday award is Tim English. So maybe a bit unlucky with the concussion, but just, I don't know, the disposals are just way down for him, and just doesn't look the same player that he was early in the year. So that's my season wrapped up there. So I think we'll get into some questions and also reflecting on our year for 2022. So first thing, Selby. So you have 2 new fantasy formats coming up, and the first one is Finals Footy Fantasy. Hopefully I got that right. Could you tell us a bit about it and how people can sign up?
Yeah, so just in case you haven't got fantasy fatigue and over your team, and you mentioned Don't Come Monday, you could throw a few extra players in that too. So we're running a comp for the finals series. So kick off, I think it's Thursday night footy next week or week and a half. So the site will be finalsfootyfantasy.com.au, yet to launch. So it should launch by the end of this week, give you a week or so to build a team. Essentially, it's going to be very casual, easy way to play as a plan. No salary caps, unlimited trades. There'll be injury subs. If you get someone injured in the first, I think, 40% game time, you'll then get your emergency score, and that emergency is likely to be a premium given there's no salary cap. So it's made to be a bit of a casual, fun way to play finals through the fantasy through the finals with decent prize, yet to be confirmed prize, but the pool's going to be largely weighted towards weekly prizes, particularly first, second, and third per week, because if you have a dud week in one of the 4, you can just butter up, unlimited trades, go again and try to win one of the prize pools the next week. So hopefully a bit of fun. Get around it when it's live. Free entry, obviously, as all fancy comps are. So we're interested to see how that one goes.
And that's through the Moreira's Magic website?
No, it'll have its own separate domain. And it's built off the platform of the AFLW Fantasy, which we did last year, which was hit and miss. It was good fun, but it obviously a lot of learnings. The platform itself crashed a few times. So we've strengthened that up hopefully. And on the back of that, we've now actually got there's a lot of effort and cost to get up and running, but now it's there. We can run other comps. So the first of those offsite being this finals one, which I think will be a bit of fun.
Yep.
So the scoring system, this will be like AFL Fantasy, so Dream Team or your kicks and marks format. Yep.
You haven't converted me completely just yet. But then again, who's to say what's going to happen in the future, because we input the scores. So they even record, it's just a ranking points, isn't it? If they record the ranking points, we would be able to emulate it for Supercoach scoring. But this year at least, it's definitely for fantasy scoring only.
No, they do. I think they do record Supercoach scores during the finals as well, which are slightly different to rankings points, but I think ultimately similar. But I think the exciting part for our viewers is a lot of them play Supercoach, don't play fantasy. So this is a really fun, friendly way to kind of dip your toe into that format just for the 4 weeks, because you can win week to week. You don't have to worry about salary cap or price movements or anything like that. It's just picking the best players or even just a team that you like and seeing how it goes each week.
Yeah, it's a bit like daily fantasy sports, but it's like weekly fantasy sports. You've got it for the week, plus you've got it for times 4 weeks. So obviously rewards longevity and whoever performs best over the 4 weeks, but it's also the small snippets as well. There will be restrictions in place. So the first week, you're only allowed to have up to 3 players per team from the 8 teams playing. And then second week of finals, when there's 4 teams playing, you'll be able to have 6 from each team. And then the grand final, 12 from each team. So you have got restrictions there. So you have to work out, say, the Bulldogs, who have plenty of fancy relevant players, pick where you're going to use your 3 players. And in terms of positions, they've been allocated as per discretion and a little bit more strict than what we see champion data dish up. You won't be getting Quantum Pelly forward or Baz Smith forward. And Trelaw was tracking to be a defender status, but those CBAs in the last game probably wrote that off. So we might have to be clutching at some genuine defenders and forwards to hopefully get you some points.
Don't tell me you're being more strict on positioning than the All-Australian selectors.
Speaking of Don't Come Monday, I saw Jack Crisp's name there and then the other way. So I didn't actually use that.
AFLW kicks off as well in 3 days, Selby. So that's all looking good and ready to go.
Yeah, and it's a little community building there. There's a few podcasts on the back of that. People are really enjoying it, the platform, because I'll put my hand up. I've never been a big knowledge or viewer of AFLW until last year when the fantasy came. So it's a nice blend between people who love their fantasy and just want an extra game to play in the off-season and those who know and love their AFLW. So that's aflwfantasy.com.au. Sign up now. That's already open. Register, put a team in. Decent prize pool. Again, yet to be announced, but should be announced in the coming days. And again, a good excuse to keep the fantasy bug going if you're not burnt out, and also get involved and watch some engagement in women's footy.
A couple of Discord members got the hat last year and they were stoked about that. So, yeah, I'm sure they'll be doing it again.
Yeah, so that's at aflwfantasy.com.au. Put the link in the description for that. So sign up for that now. But yeah, we'll get into some questions now for you, Selby. So you finished 8th this year, so that's probably one of your worst performances given your history of playing fantasy. But what do you think makes you so successful, especially the consistency? Because in Supercoach, you look at the Hall of Fame in Supercoach, and there's very, very few people that back it up year on year on year. Tommy was one of them with a back-to-back top 10s, but that's pretty much unheard of in Supercoach. So what do you think makes you really successful at this game? Is it, you put it down to like the blueprint? Is it like just discipline? Like, what would you put it down to if you could?
Yeah, it's a mixture of a lot of things, and by no means it probably sounds silly given it's happened now for 4 seasons, but there is a lot of luck involved. I'll put my hand up, so there's been a lot of luck over the journey, but Also put a lot of time into it. I'm decent with my numbers, so I really look at the numbers. But the beauty about fantasy, it's a good blend between the numbers and intuition, and as you always say, the eye test. So watching it and picking up roles, and I played a fair bit of footy myself and get a good sense of. I played multiple positions and been a shit player in decent teams and a good player in bad teams, and kind of get a good grasp on which sort of player is going to get that majority of the ball. So yeah, watch a lot of footy, played a bit of footy, and then just stick in those principles of the blueprint. And the underlying one I've always used in fantasy is to always pick a player who I think can outperform what they're priced at. And that goes against a lot of what the old school mentality was in firstly AFL fantasy, which guns and rookies was the only way to go. You pick who you think the best players in each line are going to be, and then you fill the rest up with rookies because that's who you can afford. Once the 2 trades, use or lose, came in AFL Fantasy Unlimited, you could afford not to, like, you can start without those best players in each line because you can afford to get them during the season. Whereas the risk with limited trades, and if you're going to miss out on those best scorers in the back end of the year, then you're going to fall behind. So through fantasy, I developed a thing where I just paid for underpriced players and then slowly built myself up to having that best team of 22 quicker than most teams, and then took that into Supercoach, which was a good year to do it, given that a lot of those players, and I mentioned before, Hewitt, Sicily, Neal, Brodie, Cripps, all in my starting squad. And there's probably more than any other year, and those top line expensive players probably didn't perform as well as they normally do. So that underpriced strategy probably worked better than normal. But on the flip side, it's you mentioned like Sicily was 110 that year, COVID year, before he started playing forward, and he's yet to play with his new kick-in rule and get the extra points for the kick-ins. George Hewitt's never played a go-to inside mid-roll, gets first position, feeds back. Will Brodie's never had a proper run at it inside mid. So there's actually arguments for all those underpriced players that, well, why can't they be a top liner? Why do they have to only be the expensive ones to be the top liners?
Yeah. It's interesting though. Would you, something I was thinking, so the defense this year I thought was quite difficult to nail. Probably more so in fantasy than Supercoach, because it was just felt like there wasn't really any increase until the last moment. But would you be willing, if you couldn't see much value down back, for example, next year, would you be willing to pay like call it fair price for like a Dawson or a Sicily? They will be expensive, so would you even look at those blokes next year? Obviously, like next year, a lot of water to go on the bridge, but you look at their price and you first thought is like, no?
It's a tough one. It depends if we get these extra trades again. So was those extra 5 trades Supercoach purely for the COVID, thinking that we might run into some issues and have to use them, which we actually, thank God, we didn't. And we all end up using them to upgrade our team sooner. So say we didn't have those trades, you can't afford to be as aggressive with those underpriced guys. And I did jump on some underpriced guys who didn't really deliver, like a Caldwell, a Rao. There was someone else in the midfield who I thought was underpriced and didn't quite deliver. So in terms of next year, come AFL fantasy, I certainly wouldn't pay up for those top guys unless you think they can go another level, which I don't. Supercoach is interesting. Like the scores which they were dishing up were premium midfield numbers. And is that going to be replicated again next year? I'm not sure. And in terms of paying up, I'd probably prefer to pay up for a Jordan Dawson than a James Sicily. I think a lot of things went Sicily's way this year, and Dawson, he's young, up and coming. I think he can even go another level, but I'd try to find the value. And if it's not there, maybe that you're filling that up with rookies if you can't find an underpriced guy, and getting more premiums in the other lines.
Yep. So for Supercoach 2022, so I think you've played in the past, I think like many, many years ago. I reckon I heard on your pod you finished like in the top 50 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think Supercoach data can go back to that time, but I did play back in the day and was coming. I was coming second after round 1, and but I think I picked the size. I played fantasy was my preferred. I think it might have been Dream Team back then. It was that many years ago, and put in a Supercoach team full of players who I wanted to put in my fantasy team, but couldn't fit them in there. So it was almost like a bit of a second team, and then that far outperformed. And then obviously my attention went to that. And in the West Australian or the Perth Now newspaper, they had a leaderboard for the leaders in WA, and there was a separate prize for that. And my name was in there all year, and then I ended up trying to win that towards the end. I think I traded out Gary Ablett in that round 22 match up against Melbourne when he kicked 5 goals and had 35 or whatever, and that to try to get first in WA, which then propped me from top 10, 15 overall to maybe 40 or something. I don't know the exact numbers. I'll be good to dig up and see where that went. So I've always put a team in for Supercoach, but I haven't done so since I've been good at fantasy. So since 2018, where I've applied the craft so hard at it that I almost don't want any distractions, especially with the different price points and some players are relevant in one game than the other. I just wanted to purely put my focus on fantasy. So yeah, the queue's been in the rack since about 2018.
Okay. So playing this year, is there anything you've learnt that maybe you do differently next year?
Yeah, so the trades, although they didn't come back to bite me, I'm fully aware that they probably should have. And the way I played it, which I think I had 1 or 2 trades left after round 13 or 14, in 10 seasons, probably 8 of those seasons, you get a bit caught short-handed, like we saw those with a Hewitt and copping 4 donuts in 4 weeks, or a Sam Walsh in the last round of the year. So it's definitely preservation of trades, but certainly not doing that if it's slowing down your upgrading. So when I was upgrading through round 3 to it's probably round 4 to round 10, I wouldn't take them back, which would have left me with maybe 2 or 3 trades more than I did. It's more like round 1, I think I had a Jack Hayes on the bench who got that big score, and I traded in a donut just to get that score. So that's because I didn't realize the importance of trades of that. And then the extra cash I could to get the donut. I think I had a Cherry in there. Went Cherry down to a basement price, which gave me money to go Paddy McCartan up to Moreira. And that was round 1. Then Moreira has dropped. So I traded him out back for Paddy McCartan, then traded back in Cherry. So I essentially just wasted 2 trades off the bat just to get a 126 or whatever you end up getting, or 140 maybe in Supercoach. So little trades like that I wouldn't do. And then, the Caldwell move. But then again, all you need is one Brodie or a Hewitt or whoever it is. If you have a crack at 5 of them, they're not all going to pay off, but you just need probably 4 of them to pay off to be successful. So I certainly would continue to be aggressive with the trades. That's one thing I noticed. Supercoaches were very reluctant to, except for you, George. You're ahead of your time. We're very reluctant to pull the
stupid
trades, and it was almost used as a bit of a boasting thing. Oh, yep, look at that. I've still got my 12 trades up the sleeve. So, well, what does 12 trades mean? You don't get points for them, you know.
Yeah. I know, like with the trades, I think I know this every year, but I always stuff up early. I just get a bit panicky because you know all these anti-pods. Like for us, a lot of us didn't have like a Cripps or a Sicily, so just had to like scramble to get them in early. But for me, like this year, I realized how important trades are in the back end of the season. And like I wanted to jump on like a Darcy Cameron, I couldn't because I overtraded. I wanted to get an M9 F7 swing play, and I think how many outs did we have in the back half of the year? Timmy English missed, Sam Walsh missed. If you had a Josh Kelly, he missed. Like Gawn, if you were able to cover Gawn there for a while, would have been great. He would have been a great pod to have. So those saving trades in the back half of the year is something I really want to be conscious of, so I can jump on opportunities and get that swing player. Would you agree with that? Using those, trying to be conscious of saving trades so you can take advantage of plays, like even like a Dylan Moore, who I think he lost CBAs in the last 2 weeks, but he had like a 110 stretch, jumping on plays like that. And also like we saw Short and Crisp. We were all our podcast 10 weeks in a row. How do we jump off Short and Crisp? And like it was a bit too hard to do it. So is that something like next year you'll be conscious of, saving those trades for the back half of the year?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously I learned a lot from Tommy, and I had ideas to bring in certain players, and he's obviously very big on not only bringing in players who you think are going to be top liners in their position, because that's certainly different to fantasy. We can bring in players who might not be anywhere near the top 10 in their position, but they're going to outperform their price for 4 weeks. You can trade them on, use as a price rise, jump on, go again. Whereas now to the rest of the season. So in terms of saving trades for the back end, I would have loved to trade a Crisp to Sinclair early on and been a lot more relaxing, but I wouldn't have done that in replacement of doing the upgrades early in the season.
Yeah. And what about you boys? So you got boys, I know you guys, I think I was 4 trades down on you boys for most of the year, but is that something you guys think you want to do, say, next year? Maybe even like hold your trades more than you already had?
I was probably the other way this year. I was too conservative early on, so I should have boosted earlier to fix more of my team. If I'd done that, then I would have been able to save trades later. So sometimes just being aggressive earlier and getting your team into a better place earlier saves you trades later. So like I didn't pick up Brody or Sicily, for example, who were super cheap, very discounted. Could have saved trades by not doing stuff like getting Degoe or Zorko later. So yeah, I think being more aggressive was actually probably the key for me this year. But you do have to be careful with sideways trading, because I think that's where in Supercoach a lot of people get caught up. So they use sideways trades either early on when they shouldn't, or during upgrade season. And that's where we saw things like people trading out Cogs and getting burnt by that. People trading out Heaney getting burnt by that. People trading out Petrarca. There was like a bunch of these sideways trades that just really went pear-shaped. So being more aggressive early is actually the key for me next year. And that's something I've taken out of playing fantasy this year. Points on the field is something I underestimated from a Supercoach perspective.
For me, I think I did the strategy that I think I would want to do most years. You fix a couple of mistakes in the starting team. I just didn't fix the most glaring one in getting Brody. And then from, I think, round 6 to 10, I used the boosts all in a row, upgraded, accelerated, and then just a couple went pear-shaped. Steele got injured, Baz went wrong. Got Cripps eventually, but it was too late, and then got rid of him when it was all right to keep him for the last month. So, things just went wrong for me that, you can't sort of foresee, and it's a bit unlucky. But I think the actual trading, I think I did it, the way I would want to in the future, continue doing the same thing.
Yep. So this one's for you, Selby. Do you draw inspiration?
All of these are for Selby. What are you talking about? No one wants to hear from us.
Still, okay, I won't say that next time. As you are being overly critical of me, but I'll let that one go. All right. So, Selby, do you draw your inspiration of how you play Supercoach or fantasy from anywhere else, such as like a sport, like a job, like investing, anything like that?
Nah, not really. Like a bit of the philosophies are investment philosophy, but I'd be Australia's worst investor, I reckon. But like some of the classic ones, obviously buy low, sell high. There is one very good Warren Buffett quote, which I sort of live by, and that is you'd rather get a good player at a fair price than a fair player at a good price. So I think, it's particularly in Supercoach, like it's all good and well, and I always preach value and trying to get value, but you want to get those guys who are value, who you think can still be a top liner, rather than just getting a cheap one for the sake of it. And that was what Tommy was big on all season, until he was forced to take a punt on a few fair players at good prices, like a Baker, I think he got late in the year. And then when you're stuck with those fair players, and it can really unravel. So there's one for you from the investment side, but it's more just, the fantasy and the blueprint, going back to what I know works. And it wasn't like it was the first year playing fantasy in 2017. I've been playing for years, and I finally landed on what I think is the system which works, which is buying those guys you think can outperform that price, whether that be future role change, or they've got a discount built into them from an injury or new club or new role, whatever it ends up being. Whoever you think can outperform that, fill your team with them, and then pick out those guys who have come down, because every year someone's going to get an early injury, whether it was Jack Steele this year. Mind you, I did start the season. I didn't start with Jack Steele. I got Jack Steele in pretty early. There'll be decent players and top lines who are going to come at you cheap during the year, and it's the best time to pick them off. Zach Merritt this year, I jumped on him at a decent time and got that same rise which Eno got.
Yeah. Merritt was unbelievable this year. He definitely killed me, but he's done like 115, 125 plus in the back half in previous years. So
Actually,
I do.
speaking of Merritt and Essendon, I realise there's a head coach vacancy at the mighty Essendon Football Club. With your fantasy and Supercoach finishes, you must be the most qualified candidate. Have they reached out to you yet for an interview for that job?
Obviously not, but I've always said, like, I think anyone who doesn't play fantasy or Supercoach underestimate this fantasy and Supercoach community. Like, obviously, I think they just think we must just sit in our room playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever we do. But we actually watch players specifically more closely than anyone else. Like Jack Crisp being in the Australian, we've watched him and how he just sort of going half hard, sort of sits off the contest, ball goes over his head, and watch how their running patterns, how hard they're running more than anyone else. So certainly, I'd reached out. I wouldn't have any value in an AFL club, but I reckon that a group of fantasy coaches could at least tell some coaches and teams how their players are actually performing.
I'll tell you what, when Leo Cameron was costing me Josh Kelly last year, I knew every position he played that entire year, every round, where he started at every CBA. I could have been an opposition analysis on Josh Kelly for any club for 22 weeks last year. So yeah, like just echoing your point. I think, well, the only problem is we get very tunnel visioned on the players that we care about from a Supercoach perspective. But anyone in the 22 of our teams or thereabout, we're guns on that.
He's made the squad this year, JD.
Yeah, he has. Yep. Well, Leon's gone, so that's to be expected. Cream rising to the top again.
He's actually another one. Like, he hasn't been that good.
Nah.
And a few of his possessions pretty late, like that game against, who was the one in
the game style is ridiculous.
Doggies. Oh, you're a Doggy supporter, George. How bad he was that game? Was just sort of
Crow supporter, a secondary.
Crow supporter.
You wouldn't know he's a Crow supporter. If Crows and Dogs games clashes, he's got the Dogs games on.
And also the coach.
No comment.
Might be a new team next year for dunks, though.
That'd be nice. But yeah, Josh Kelly not going there ever again, I think. Next question is, so Selby, what were your main focuses in your preseason research? So like, how important is like eye test, stuff like that? Do you like check CBAs, everything like that? So yeah, what's the main focuses of the preseason for you?
Yeah, CBAs are big, and it's become a lot easier now that that's public data. I think since 2020, we've had access to CBAs. There's no secret that you see a trend in centre bounce attendances. Typically, that brings about an uptick in points. And that's exactly what we're looking for on starting squads and who's priced at whatever, and if they can outperform that. So the stats is big. Eye test also big. It's hard to get too caught up in the eye test in the preseason, though, given that you do all this research over the preseason that you can make. It's hard to make calls on a little practice match. But the numbers I like to look at are trends in fantasy points, trends in CBAs over a few years, splits, so like the last 5 games of the prior year, the last 10 games, same thing, splits between CBAs and scores and points per minute, and if there's an uptick there. And then look at ways you think that they could outperform that price. So obviously dividing their price by the magic number to see that average, which do you think they need a score to keep up that price, and look at all the other scores they've done and where they've been at their best and whether you think that they can outperform that by a certain level. So certainly a lot of numbers go into it. And then it helps that I do watch a lot of footy the year before that in terms of eye tests, you feel like you've got that built into you, that how they look on the eye.
What about injuries, Selby? I know George is the doctor in here, but how much like do you write off players for certain injuries? And I know every injury is different, so you can't have a sort of a blanket rule. But like full preseason, like if they've had a pretty interrupted one, will you stay away as a rule?
Not a rule, but it probably should be. So injuries, I actually like getting players off the back of an injury because you try to find a discount wherever you can, and like Sicily was one of them. I'm not sure what the discount he was in Supercoach, but fantasy, he missed a full season. He was discounted 30% lower than what his average was the prior year, which, as George mentioned, he was discounted on that anyway because he played forward a bit of that. So you try to find a discount wherever you can. And if it's an injury which caused that discount, then you take that risk because more often than not it pays off. But on the flip side, someone like a Matt Crouch was also on the watch list and he came off an injury, soft tissue, but his pre-season was interrupted and he missed some training sessions. So thankfully didn't start with him, but he ended up having a shocking season for both Supercoach and for the Crows itself as well. So no blanket rule. They certainly all automatically come on the watch list on the back of an injury, and then it's just about if they can probably, without having it the rule there, the full pre-season obviously helps.
And now a quick word from our sponsors at Manscaped. They're bringing us the Ultra Smooth package to Australia. It's time to stop, drop, and order the premium shaving kit. Everyone knows by now that the Lawnmower 4.0 is the best electric shaver for your balls. But if you're looking for a closer shave and go down there, then the Ultra Smooth package is for you. It is time to shave your bush, that bush of yours, and get right to the roots. And we have a discount code just especially for you guys, 20% off using the code FTTV. That's 20% off using the code FTTV. All products at Manscaped are vegan, cruelty-free, and sulfate-free products, so you know your manhood is in good hands. We've been using the Lawnmower 4.0. I've used it I think 3 times now, and it gets better every time. Boys, out of 10, Lawnmower 4.0, how good is it? 11, correct.
Well, it does its job, mate. So absolutely, 10 out of 11. I don't know what the fuck to say. Oh,
Get it now,
boy.
and you won't be disappointed. You'll be the only bloke left with that one at this rate if you don't have it by now. So this one we can go around to everyone. So never again list. So with never again list, like anything can happen. I guess I remember Michael Walters was on my never again list, and he was all Australian and the top. I mean, he was top 4 forward one year. But anyone in mind that you guys never want to pick again? I mean, I'm still happy to pick Heaney, I think, at the right price. Tim English is pretty close to my never again, just cops so many knocks. I think soft tissues, he had one this year, Hammy. I think a little bit unlucky. He copped a bit of a cork as well there. So maybe, I'm not sure I have anyone on the never again list. Probably the closest would be a Tim English. And I don't think I'll start Cogs again. Maybe at a discounted price. Maybe that's a little harsh, but Enno, who's on your never again list?
I put this one down. I just sort of I don't think you should have never again lists. Really, I know we all like want to write people off and say stuff this bloke, never picked him again. I think Whitfield's like probably the most common you would see around all fantasy communities, Supercoach, everything, just because of how many times it's happened and GWS in particular. But like, to be honest, if he's going to be a pretty decent price for next year. New coach, they just got Kingsley today from the Tigers. You assume or hope that they'd play some, better footy. Put him in his, correct positions. I think we sort of have to still consider it. You can't just completely wipe him off. So I personally don't. Maybe it would only be if a guy's just had so many injury problems in the past that. You just can't trust him. And I guess Whitfield is probably one of those guys, but he's never really the type of injuries that repeat. It's just he's been pretty unlucky. So I probably don't. What about you, JD? And then I guess we'll get to Selby. But yeah, I don't have him. I don't think you should, really.
Yeah, I am the same boat. Like, it's best probably not to keep a never again list, although I know in my head it should be GWS players, and there's a bunch of this list, like Whitfield, Williams in days gone past, Josh Kelly almost never works out. Those combined with discounted injured superstars of like 3 to 5 years ago. So you like Dangerfield, Fife, Dusty now, like these types of players. You should probably just never pick them either. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've got amnesia, like I'm in Memento or something like that, where every year I pick up the sign that says no GWS players, and then I load up my team with 3 or 4 of them because they're underpriced and could be guns. So probably do it again next year, even though I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, I'm the same as Enno in terms of you shouldn't have one because every player should be relevant at the right price. And you know that a lot of coaches are rational and then irrational, and then they will not pick someone purely because of their name, and all you need is for them to have that breakout. You can take that leap. It's it's more, as JD mentioned, looking at teams. So like GWS this year, we all stacked sides with them. We realised that no one can predict their midfield rotation. So while Leon was there, then hindsight was where we should have never picked a GWS player. When it comes to Richmond and Jaden Short, we've known for years they're just not high possession players of the footy. So the never again should be, well, even Short gets the midfield, he's not going to score, so maybe avoid Richmond players. So it's more maybe on certain game styles and teams. And unfortunately, and we saw that with Collingwood again, with McRae, he's taken some of those Richmond philosophies and hence not many high possession players at the Pies. And it's going to be interesting to see another alumni Richmond coach being Kingsley going to GWS, if he's going to bring that philosophy of low possession, slap the ball forward, low fancy points. So that's something to watch for next year.
Okay, just quick one around the room. So obviously new coach, but Lachie Whitfield, $470K next year. Cheapest starting price he's been in a long time. Will you be leaning towards yes or no for Lachie Whitfield for that price? Selby, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I paid up more than that this year to start him. So if I can get him cheaper, then I certainly will be.
JD?
Leaning yes, I'd say. JD?
He is on my 2023 cheat sheet already. Yes. Yeah, I'll be looking at him for sure. To be fair, there are lots of other interesting, cheaper price players next year as well. So he's not a lock, but yeah, definitely be in consideration.
Where do you boys draw the line?
Here we go.
I know it's weird because no soft tissue injuries, which generally repeat, but if it's not his hip, it's his ankle. So his ankle.
I was going to say, well, what was it this
something
year?
else.
Wasn't like really early that
His
he was playing through
ankle.
something?
Ankle.
Yeah, from like what round?
Round one. Round one.
Yeah, it was undisclosed. It was like full
Yeah.
preseason into actually is carrying something basically all year. And
Leon's
like
round
groin
3.
problems as well, I reckon.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Hopefully, new coach, maybe they actually report their injuries next year. Probably, so 2 more quick ones. So Selby, you've been very ambitious. What you've done for fantasy sports has been unreal. You got the platform, you got the podcast with Big X and Tommy. You always, every year, you seem to improve. Do you have any big plans? You don't have to say them, but are you planning?
Yeah,
do
no,
big
you
plans
do.
for
Breaking news.
2023?
This is a breaking news.
You might not want
podcast.
to share anything yet, but any big plans for next year for fantasy and Supercoach?
Nothing in particular. Like, as I mentioned, like people who don't play fantasy think that we sit there and it's not a very cool thing to do in Australia, play fantasy sports, whereas I spend a lot of time over in the States. And if you don't play fantasy sports there, you're kind of left out of the chat, the water cooler chat. And it's just a cool sport over there. So just trying to emulate some stuff, which is over there. And EPL as well, as Eno knows how big it is and how undervalued I think fantasy sports is in Australia. So continue to try to bring things to bring the attention to it, and starting off with the competitions themselves, which is a tough one because, they cost a bit of money to run, and we obviously can't charge people to play either the finals fantasy or women's fantasy because then it's deemed to be gambling. So free comps and just trying to work out ways to bring fantasy footy back to become cool again, which you guys certainly do. And I'm out of the Supercoach podcast, I'm pretty time poor, but this was one I'd certainly tune into during the year.
So just on next year's plans, actually.
Words.
Oh,
Go
yes. We'll accept the compliment. Thank you. So obviously you've stepped away from fantasy for a couple of years, but played Supercoach just because you're going to do a podcast on it. May as well have a go at the game. Are you looking at returning to Supercoach, and are you considering, has it given you the itch to play fantasy again?
Not last round. The stress levels came back to those to get the top 10. I will play Supercoach, I reckon. So the reason why I don't play fantasy, which is true because I charge for the content, and if I've got people paying for my advice, and I was also playing and I wanted to win as well in the fantasy land, part of me would be wanting to withhold some of my best advice. So by not playing, it could be full disclosure and give my best content out there. But realistically, it's because there's every chance I could come 5,000th, 10,000. I know how hard the game is. And people guys lost and they won't come in again next year. Whereas Supercoach is a bit more of a free hit for me, less of a reputation to hold up. And certainly the free hit was this year. It'll be interesting to see the learnings from last year to see how it stacks up. And I'm just watching Tommy and how across everything he is and his philosophies of what he runs true. And then a bit of bad luck mid-season, and he took a few shortcuts with some players, and just see how quickly you can go to 10,000, how competitive it is in Supercoach. So there's every chance I could come 10,000th, but it was a bit of fun and a good way to play without being the pressure which I used to feel with fantasy, trying to uphold the good record.
We haven't asked you, but I maybe something I want to ask you is what do you think about the scoring in general with Supercoach and Champion Data? You don't have to sit in pick a side or whatever, but I mean they both got their pros and cons. Let's be honest, but yeah, what did you make of it? Playing it probably your first full serious season.
Yeah, there's elements I really liked about it. About the one, it made watching the game a bit more enjoyable rather than just waiting for someone to get a kick. You'd get a kick and he'd still be hanging on where that ball was going to go, and then someone else marks. Oh, let's hope they score here. Get a score involved, and there's all so much stuff which goes into it. So it keeps your attention going a bit too much. But I also liked it that, say, like Zach Butters, who I owned, who got off to a flyer that game when they smashed whoever it was that day. Might have been Swans, was it? And he then got injured halfway through the second, and while being on the bench for 3 quarters, and people bagged the game that their points still go up even though they haven't been on the field. Well, he was impactful when the game was won or lost. Yeah. So their points keep going up there. So there's certain elements in that, and which I really liked, the scoring system. I mean, it'd be good to know the exact formula. And watching enough games or watching the scoring system, you kind of get a good feel for it. But I'm probably pro the scoring system. I'm against the fact that it's no live updates and rankings, and the platform I think is pretty clunky on the thing. And then who knows the trades, the limited trades versus unlimited trades. Like, part of me quite like not having that stress of making the decision each week, knowing that they're out of my hands, let the trades run. But on the flip side, if this was fancy, I could have made a few moves. Even at the end, when I was, say, 300 points behind the leaders with 6 rounds to go, I would have loved to trade out those popular owned players, bring in some unique players, which could have backfired. I could have finished 25th, 30th, but also would have given me a chance, like JD tried to do in fantasy, and try to go for the top. So there's a bit more cat and mouse in fantasy, which I quite like.
Last one before we let you go. I will go around the room on this one. So more of an AFL question here, but who do you think the best player in the league? Who's your favorite player and your premiership tip? So I'll start. So the best player in the league, I think it's Clayton Oliver. My favorite player to watch is Connor Rosie, and my tip for the flag are the Swans. So I'm excited for the final series. Enno, what do you reckon?
On the spot, I think the best player in the league for me, Clary's a very good one. I'd probably have him second, but I think it's still the Bont. What he can do affect a game, with limited disposals is just unreal. He's been quite injured a lot, probably the last 2 years really, after his hot patch last year. But I'd say still full fitness. He's just the guy I'd want on my team. Favorite player to watch, I mean, it probably could be him as well, to be honest, but maybe like a Dawson, just owning him all year. It's been fun to watch him play multiple positions as well, because he's played all over the ground. Be nice if he was in a little bit better team watching him forward of the ball, because I just think he has that much effect as well. And then the tip for the flag, I think the D's, if they they got their game going. I know Brisbane, I don't know what's going on there, but if they've got their sort of confidence back heading into finals now, and their game back, back in Melbourne as well. I just read a tweet today. They're not leaving Melbourne for the whole finals, no matter what happens, whether they lose the first one, win or whatever. So at the G in front of their fans that they couldn't play in front of last year, I think for me, it's probably them. JD?
So I was going to say Clayton Oliver for the first two. I think he's both the best player in the league, and I actually really enjoy watching him play. I know there are more exciting X Factor types, but just you get consistency in every game. You get to basically see him at his best. Tip for the premiership would be the Cats. I know it's pretty popular to hate on them just because of their history of making it to the finals and then exiting as quick as they arrived, but they are the one team that doesn't seem to have a glaring weakness in any of their lines. They've got a healthy list. They've been consistent. I did get a little bit nervous after seeing D's played some really good form on the weekends, but yeah, I think it's hard to go past the Cats just given what they've put together this year. Selby.
I was tossed up between Oliver and Bont, and they're the ones you've said. Probably Clayton Oliver. I think his kicking's underrated and his pace is underrated. Like, he spreads from contests as well as other players, but he doesn't get those accolades just because people think he's that in and under. Best to watch. Oh, there's a heap. Just a real left field one, just because I love watching him yesterday. Brandon Maynard, like his aggression. He doesn't make a mistake. I'd love to see him have a proper crack at the midfield because I think he could be, unlike a short Chris being pushed in there, I think he could be more of a Laird Mills, which will be a high tackler, throws himself around, also can rack him up. The one to watch if he ever gets that look of a role change. And I'm on the D's as well for the flag.
Yeah, I must say, when like I found out Chris was going into midfield this year rather than Maynard, I was so confused because I was sure after last year it was Maynard that was going to get the run through. But yeah,
too good down back. I think.
I was going to say someone you'd love to have a couple of. Definitely one of those players for sure.
Yeah, so I think we'll wrap it up there. I know you got your podcast to do, Selby. So thanks so much for joining us. What you do for the fantasy community is unreal. Just building every year. So I was just thinking, how can we keep growing fantasy? I'd love to see a fantasy TV show, and maybe you can get into X, get that somehow get that organized. You guys would do like a TV show. I don't know, because he's got all the media connections. But I think that'd be a great idea. Is that something you'd be at all interested in if you somehow had the time for it?
Yeah, obviously I'm not as good on screen as not as polished these days, but it would be great to have that, and I think there'd be a want and a need for it. But again, I just don't think both broadcasters and anyone else realise the impact and how many people would even the fact that you don't even see fancy points or scores on the screen, like build it into broadcast rights. The amount of people who watch certain games purely for their fancy is underrated.
Did you ever see like a press red for Ed on Foxtel where you get like the alternate commentary with like Eddie Maguire and like a Collingwood Nuffy squad on a Collingwood game? I'm sure if you had like a fantasy or Supercoach commentary box that was the alternate one people could swap over to, you would get tons of people that would be more interested in that than listening to the actual podcast. People begging for players that like on their team, like just one more tackle, come on. But yeah, I'm sure that'd get some good viewers.
Yeah, Warney, Calvin, and Roy, the guys who run the AFL traders, they're brilliant at what they do. They're the best in the business, and they did live stream on radio one game, which was good to watch. But again, you couldn't sync it with the screen and watch the game. So there's something in that.
Yep.
I did a TV show. That'd do a good job.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate what Selby said because, like, I play the other ones and just see how popular it is. Like, and as you said, incorporating to the TV show. You watch NFL Red Zone; it's like on the side. It's like the main thing they show. It's like the best wide receiver of the day, running back. FPL, there's got a literal show that goes for like 2 hours a week about it. So, and they've actually get like content creators that have just come from building their own brand onto those shows, like onto the FPL shows. So, look, obviously in Australia, it's not as many eyeballs, but it just would be cool. And it is cool what you do, building up the fantasy community because, I want to make it cool again. It's a good talking point. Like there's, like we said, there's not many, there's a couple of games a week you probably wouldn't even turn the TV on for, but you've got a couple of players in them and you're happy to watch. So they definitely, hopefully in the future can look at stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll let you go now. Selby, thanks so much for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
No worries. All right, so that's the interview done, but I think we can touch on the All-Australian team. So the squad is out. You can check that out. It's all over Twitter and whatnot. I think we went over at the main one, probably a Crisp, maybe a Kelly. Not too happy about. Any general thoughts? Any players are stiff to miss? What do you guys think?
I think the two names that I've seen that are stiff to miss, which like I think most people agree with, it, Doherty and Dawson, two of the halfbacks or like slash wings that kind of did really well this year, both defensively and offensively. Especially Dawson was able to play multiple positions really well. There's a few players in there that I could see that I would quite easily take out for him. Yeah, otherwise, I think a lot of the other ones are line balls. It's just, fans arguing for their homer pick. There's always going to be a 45th and a 46th best player, and you can pretty easily argue they should be in over the ones that are in there. But I think those two were probably the biggest howlers for mine, or at least like the most obvious omissions. Did you guys find anyone else that you thought was really stiff to miss?
I thought Doherty had a good year.
Yeah, Doc's real stiff.
Doc had some like really massive games. I know he gets like a fair bit of junk kick mark down in the back half, but he goes with the back of the flight. What's the saying? Backs into contests all the time. Spoils, does all the defensive stuff, and then offensively provides so much drive. So I thought, I would have had him in, possibly even in the 22, but not to be.
I had him in my 22. I mean, especially the last couple of weeks, like being down midfielders, he's gone in there at times to help out. I mean, well, not at times. He's 80 and 88% CBAs the last 2 weeks. Like he is played well in there for them, and I thought he could easily be in. But it's weird. Like there's probably limitations, or not limitations, but how many certain position they got to have. General forward, key forward, general defense. All that sort of stuff. So you kind of got to take him out from there. So looking at the defenders, I'm assuming Gus Brayshaw. I just think he makes a team is one. Maynard, Sard, Sinclair, Rioli. Maybe it's 5 they've got. So you could easily have them over a Rioli, maybe a Maynard, but I guess they want some Collingwood representative, and he's probably their best shout maybe for a spot. But yeah,
Nick Dacos is probably one that we didn't mention was stiff to miss that probably would have been their shout. I mean, Darcy Moore is probably the only other one, but I think there are lots of other key defenders that had really good, really good years. I think the only other tall forward I can think of would be Peter Wright, who I think kicked 6 more goals
over
than Tex in an equally bad side. But I don't know, Tex does lots of stuff around the ground that Peter Wright maybe doesn't, although Peter Wright plays more in the ruck. So once again, this is fans arguing for homers, right? Those are line ball picks where someone's got to miss out. So you could argue either way.
Maybe they're guys that probably weren't making it anyway. So, but Doc and Dawson are blokes that probably had a chance, you would think.
Yeah, totally.
So they're the ones that probably, at least you'd think be recognised in the 40.
Yep. I reckon to finish up, I got the squad of it's 44 this year, I believe Tom Brown tweeted.
Has that changed?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It kind of makes sense, I guess, if you're picking 22 and double it rather than 40. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to read out 10 names, and you just have to say in or out of the 22. So in or out.
Crisp out.
Of the 44, please.
Okay. Mark Blitzarves.
I didn't have him in mind, but I think in. I think he actually makes it.
No, not whether he makes it or not.
For me?
Do you think he should be in? Yeah.
I'm even warming
in
to
the
it.
22 or the 44?
Just say in the 22 or out the 22.
Oh, okay.
I say out.
JD's thinking real hard.
So I think it depends if you're
Would
not
you
picking if you're not picking a second ruck, he can be in. Otherwise, out. I don't think as a key defender standalone he was good enough to get in. But if he's playing defender and second ruck, then fine. He can also be a tagger, I guess.
Marcus Bontempelli.
In.
I had him out.
In. Brennan Cox.
Out.
That'll go to Sicily, Taylor, and May.
Yep.
Tom
I think he's
Hawkins.
stiff to miss, by the way. He's is actually very good, but there's others ahead.
So there's 4 key forwards that are pretty much in the running. Tex won't get in, but Hawkins. I think it's between Hawkins and Lynch. So say Hawkins or Lynch in the team. I'll go with Lynch. I think he's been more dominant, had more dominant games.
I mean, oh, Homer say Lynch. I had him in mind. Like his goals per game is clear number one, but Hawkins does so much more too. Like I think he's top 2 and like your assists and goal, that type of thing. So he does bring others into the game. It's stiff. Yeah. Could we get to Spreader Kerno? I know he won the Coleman, but geez, he really just off his last 2 weeks.
Nah, he's been good.
Really, no, I know. It's stiff. Someone's got to miss.
I would say I'd have Hawkins. I think Lynch's numbers are slightly inflated, by the way. The Hawks game where they were just mucking around with game plan, and so he didn't have a defender and kicked 8 was a bit of a joke. And Essen wasn't much better. I think outside of those 2 games, his goal numbers are slightly inflated. And I agree, what Hawkins does around the ground is just better. So it's fine if Lynch gets in, but I would have Hawkins ahead.
Isaac Heaney.
He's in for me.
Yeah. Like if you're picking a proper team with proper half forwards rather than midfielders, then he's got to be in. I think there's not too many that do that role better.
Yep, agree. Rory Laird. Tough competition for mids. Obviously, I'm going to say in. So in for me.
I had him
on the
in
bench
over Cripps.
I haven't put a side together. I could see myself going either way. I think this is where Supercoach in fantasy blinds us a little bit because he's been so dominant in those formats that my gut reaction is just to say in. But watching the games, I don't think he was as dominant or had the X factor that some of the other mids do that would typically get them in. Right, this is why Jack McRae doesn't get accolades because he's just a bit vanilla.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts. Just all the tackles, all the inside 50s, all that. They just add up, but nothing spectacular.
I mean, at least Laird has the defensive side of his game and the tackling that lifts him up, and I think does really put him into consideration over a McRae or Titch outside of his Brownlow year. I will go out though, or no, in. He probably makes a bench spot. I'll say in.
Connor Rosie.
This is hard. I had him in on the bench. I believe.
I think probably in, and he's the other half forward that isn't Heaney. Which is, I guess, a little bit of a cop out because his best role this year was during playing midfield, not really half forward.
I think he'll either get a bench if he's in. He'll either be on the bench or on the wing, just because that's how it works.
Who's he competing against? For spots?
He's a mid.
I don't know what they do. That's
but they're going to put him at half forward, right?
Probably Mills and Bont for a bench spot, something like that.
I would have thought they're putting against Fritsch, Stengel, Rosie, Heaney will all go up against each other.
Nah, I think
they'll kick out the actual small forwards.
The forward line, I think, will actually be all forwards this year. That's
There's
what
enough there.
do.
Yeah,
there's too many.
Cameron and Bolton.
Yeah. Oh,
Heaney.
okay. Well, then I'd say he's probably out then.
And
he's started. Rosie's start of the year was bad enough that I didn't have him out.
If they do have a midfield on the half-forward flank, it'll probably be Petrarca.
Yeah,
true. Yeah, so I'll say out then.
Although his goal kicking was deplorable this year. Track.
Yeah. What about Thomas Stewart?
Oh, sorry, just on Rosie before we go to Stewart. Would you rather have Bolton or Rosie? I feel similar
different
players.
Positions. Different positions.
Bolton's mid that goes forward as well.
Rosie's more your pure mid, up and down the middle of the ground.
But they're both smaller mids at X Factor.
Not the way. Rosie's not playing that way at the moment. That X Factor that he was, he's collecting heaps of the pill.
Well, I'd still take Rosie over Bolton, but I think Bolton's going to be a lock, probably.
Whereas Shane more than
What about Tom Stewart?
Tom Stewart. Well, now looking at it, he's in, really, isn't he, George? I know you've looked at it and you've had a bit of a cry over it. But with the defenders they've picked in the 40 for no Doc or Dawson there, I'm pretty sure he just has to make it now. So I would say he's in.
What's it's Sinclair and Stewart?
It's your Wilkies and Brennan Coxes and stuff.
Cicely May Taylor, Sinclair.
And what do they do in the past? They reward the top team on the ladder with 5.
Stewart. Yeah.
They always reward them with 5. So
And then Gus won't get in because 4 other Ds will get in, or 3
he can-
others.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
you're
maybe,
right.
maybe.
I hope he
maybe
does.
then.
I
Yeah,
hope he does.
I think it'll be embarrassing if he gets in, but that's me. Missed too many games.
5, is that too many? Is like
It's
that's
Got
probably the
concussed
cutoff.
early, basically 6.
Okay, right. How? Yeah.
And he
it
hasn't,
is on the
well,
cusp.
he hasn't really done anything for 4 weeks. So he's basically been out for 8 weeks.
Oh,
Tag
God.
So
he did
basically missed.
have a bad
He's
4
basically
weeks
missed 10
stretch.
games.
Yeah.
So is Crisp. Maybe 20.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think-
I would have picked Dawson and probably Doherty ahead of Stewart in the 22.
How much do they go into? Is this a team that's playing a game? Because
Not
if
really.
he's there along with 3 other tall defenders, it doesn't make sense, I would think. But who knows? They never. Let's be honest. They put midfielders on the wing for 10 years.
All right, we'll do 2 more. Jared Witz.
Are they bench spot or ruck? Or
Yeah,
not?
whichever.
But that's what are they going to do that? That's my thing.
Well, they've done it in the past, so he'd be consideration for a second ruck.
The ruck's
I think
tough.
he's
So
he's
many
been
just
pretty stiff though.
underperformers. I don't know. I think Gorn's better, clearly. So if they're happy enough to pick him, he's only missed a couple Gorn, so no, I'd say Witz misses out. Which would be unlucky. He's been really good.
So, how many hitouts do you think Gorn had for the year?
Not sure. I'd say Witz would
Nowhere
have a
near
lot more.
Witz.
So,
But-
Jared Witz had 833. Max Gorn had 530. So, Witz had over 300 more than 50% more. Gorn was the number 6 for hitouts this year, where Jared Witz was like clear number 1, basically 100 over second, which was O'Brien.
Yeah. You know what
What about
argument's coming? though.
disposals?
Yeah. Max had games like
Disposals.
25, 30.
They're ruckman. Yeah. Like I think that's obviously the really interesting thing here.
If Max could
Gorn
kick
has-
straight, it'd lock
Yeah.
his spot in because he gets so many looks at it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is Gorn had a few games this year where he was kind of the reason why the D's won. It never, even Witz's better ruck games, it never felt like he was the reason why they won, outside maybe 1 or 2 early. But like the ruck dominance just doesn't seem to like translate into game dominance as much as what Gorn can do around the ground, both like intercepting defense in the forward line. So I would imagine that Gorn gets picked over Witz. Just Vic Bias, been there before, big name, captain of a top side. But like, yeah, I could see Witz getting in. Yeah.
Last one, Callum Mills.
This just feels like wing spot all over it, doesn't it?
I guess so.
I'm gonna say no. I think he's had a few quiet games. He gets thrown down back, so I don't know. Probably does he really kick goals? Not really.
Here and there, not a lot.
He's had a really good year.
He's
He
had
gets a
good year.
lot of cheap possessions in the back half.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a
Bit like
linking player.
Brayshaw.
Yeah,
So I think there
He's
was
still
one
good.
game. There was one game where he destroyed the Hawks. I think it was. That
Yeah,
was
he's
his
got like
clear.
210.
down in Tassie.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was like his clear best game of the year, where he was not only that accumulator around the ground, but really damaging. And the last 2 months, honestly, he has been playing outside, down back, lots of cheap touches, not as much of the damaging play. Still obviously good, but if he's in consideration for a ring role, I could see him getting it. If he's playing pure mid against some of the other options here, I'd have him out.
Okay. I think we'll wrap it up there, boys. It was good to speak to Selby. Definitely can learn a lot from him. Any closing comments?
Actually,
Go.
yes, there is. There was a bet that you were all too happy to forget about, George, that's been running all year between one Matthew Rowell and one Patrick Lipinski. Would you like to hear the final results?
And
Matthew Rowell is the winner. 19.25 points to Lipinski's 18.89. I think he needed something like 100 and whatever it was, like a big 120 score to get over the line, but couldn't do it in the last round. So Rowell takes the cake.
George wants Dylan Shield to
Yeah,
not be
90.
forgotten.
I think I read 92 average for Dylan Shield.
Yes, but at total points,
George
he's
gets
not
2
even
players,
close.
apparently.
Yeah, not even close. He's 250
Oh.
points behind. 150 points behind.
Okay, so what am I supposed to do?
I don't know. We'll maybe figure that out for next week. If listeners have got any suggestions on what George's punishment should be, let me know.
I think you should also cop a smaller punishment. Even though I had 2 players, ultimately, you let me have Dylan Shield in the bet, so you signed up for that.
Do we need to get the clip? I forget what was said.
Yeah,
I think I said, anyway.
No, so originally what
find
happened was George agreed to Shield versus Rao, right? And then the next week he was like, yeah, it's Lipinski versus Rao.
He backed out of it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so he swapped it, and I was like, oh, whatever, take both of them. It doesn't matter. So yeah, it's been pretty poorly run. But look, I'm happy to take a small punishment as well. Maybe Eno can talk with some of the boys in the Discord and come up with some appropriate punishments.
Yeah. We'll have some bets next year, maybe as well, and figure out punishments before. My last thing is I'll just shout out all the Discord members and just the community members, I guess, and the support this year. We're not stopping, as we said. We're doing some during the finals. Going to do Selby's game, and we might make up a Supercoach one ourselves, sort of just a free hit weekly thing for a bit of fun. But yeah, all the support. We had actually quite some success, I guess, with some leagues. The top 6-teamer, top 10-teamer. Our sort of teams, me and JD, in the 12-teamers perform well. Still can't find where George is, so I won't scroll. And then in the 18-teamers, which I guess is the main one, we weren't able to pip off number 1, but we had the number 2 league with quite a few Discord members in that. So whilst it might feel like we haven't got the greatest end rankings in the world, me and JD climbed, and JD climbed all the way to the best of us 3, but it's still been a pretty successful year for us and most of our community. So yeah, that's all I got. I guess we'll see you next week.